Welcome to Soulful Living. I'm Phillip Mountrose with a wonderful guest, returning guest, our friend, colleague, Micah Blacklight. I have I have 3 decades of experience with my wife and partner, Jane, in the field of holistic coaching and healing, founder of IAHP, the International Association of Holistic Practitioners, and Awakenings Institute, devoted to making the world a more loving place that honors everyone, including nature. And today, as I mentioned, Micah Blacklight is with us, returning. Mike is kind of a force of nature, as I'll explain. And the topic today is actually listen, then respond, talking about listening from a more soulful place today. And we're going to offer some very practical ways to understanding that. And Micah, and he may add to his biography, is a multi-platform, multi-dimensional artist, coach, fashion designer, has a lot of different platforms and talents, helps people be empowered and inspired, and like a spirit boat on the lake of existence. And Micah, welcome back to Soulful Living. Great to see you again.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. So relative to your background, if you want to add to anything too, how did you get to this point, this topic today on Soulful Living about actually listen, then responding?
Well, again, thank you for having me. I think that when they hear the word relationships, they automatically think intimacy. They automatically think, spouse, partner, lover, what have you. But what we fail to recognize is that anytime we're interacting with pretty much anyone, we're relating, we're in a relationship, and we develop habits. We develop ways of communicating. Some of those habits serve us, and some of them are more detrimental than others. And I arrived at this topic because in my work as a coach and as a friend, and just as a person who listens and pays attention, I've come across a lot of folk who tend to find themselves, when confronted with a certain kind of energy, they're getting small. And what ends up happening is they're doing themselves a disservice. They're doing the world a disservice by dimming who they are, and by the ways that they're listening and what they're listening to, and the ways that they're responding can be very, very disempowering, and denigrating and self-denigrating more than anything else. So I figured it would be a good thing to speak to with you and with your audience.
Right. Talking and listening is a key part of why we're here. And we tend to sometimes talk through people, get distracted, get very identified with what we want to say, and maybe not listen to people. And then on the other end, we may sometimes be just overwhelmed, just being submissive to other people. Like, that person's an expert, that person must know what they're saying.
Or just there's people who are really good at talking fast. Right?
Right.
There's people who can argue well. There's people who are more versed in asserting their point, in trying to prove someone wrong, as opposed to being in dialogue, right? Like, some conversations aren't conversations. We've all experienced the conversations with folk with whom we feel like they're talking at us as opposed to us. Right? Like, there's a difference. The folk who are paying attention to what you're saying, the folk who are actually listening to what you're saying, versus the folk who are waiting for a chance to talk. And as soon as they get in that, then it's just all about, and they didn't even hear anything you just said. They're not paying attention to any opinions that you just put forward. There's those people too.
So, kind of stepping back and looking at it maybe from a soulful perspective, a person is in a relationship. So we have, say, maybe a close person, a partner, or it could be a friend, someone's close.
Totally could be a friend.
Yeah, you want to listen closely from your heart and have that open listening without being overwhelmed or submissive. So there's kind of a balance there of when to speak, when to really understand, when to respond. Now, some people, if they are overwhelming you with their comments and opinions, even if they sound right, then what?
So it this totally depends on who you are as who you choose to be as a person, like what kind of energy you have. Like some people tend to be more pulled back. If you're verbose, if you're extroverted, then you have a better chance of sliding in edgewise and like cutting through. But if that's not you, if that's not your energy, then one of the ways to respond, I think that like may bring someone up short, is if you're in conversation and you're trying to get a point across and you're sort of stumbling over your words and the person is just hammering you with da da da, then you'd be like, can you give me a moment
Mm-hmm.
to say what I'm trying to say? Can you listen to me for a second? Right. And just that question alone, like, just can you listen to me for a moment without commenting until I get my full thought out? Can you please do that? Like, would you be willing to do that? That alone frames the person in a certain way, because whatever their response is, oh, you think I'm, whatever way they're coming from that point on gives you an opportunity to be like, oh, this isn't even a conversation I need to have right now. Right. Like, because if the person isn't willing to respond in a way that is honoring of the space you just asked for, then that's not a conversation. They've just shown you what's actually happening. It's not a conversation. They're in for getting their point, and you're just like, I'm gonna remove myself from this conversation until such time as you're actually willing to have a conversation. Right now, we're not
Mm-hmm.
dialoguing. It's just you speaking at me. Right. So that's,
Mm-hmm.
I think, one just a
Mm-hmm.
really good question is just to pause for a second. When they're could you do me a favor? As it, could you give me a moment to say what I have to say without interrupting me? Could you do that,
Mm-hmm.
please? Just that question. Just that
Mm-hmm.
question. And say it in as calm a voice as you possibly can. Even if you're triggered, even if you got stuff going on, just say it in as calm a voice as you can and just ask the question. I think that's a huge tool. Huge. Super huge.
Mm-hmm. So in a personal, in a close relationship with someone, you have to kind of develop almost these boundaries or rules where uh, sometimes you feel you're overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you're defensive, you don't know what to
Mm-hmm.
say, you become very passive, and the other
Mm-hmm.
person may be, overly active. So there may be kind of a balance there. So the boundaries, uh, and I think there could be that sense of pausing and coming back, as you said, to a place
Mm-hmm.
where you're in a better place. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, if you're not that close to the person, you may not come back for quite a while.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
at all. Not at all. And you don't have to, but, and I feel like just asking the question, even if it's not a person you're close to, asking the question frames it in such a way that they automatically get to experience themselves as being sort of bossy and pushy. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
that's what's showing up, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
just saying, can you give me a moment? I shouldn't even have to ask you to give me a moment, right? We're having a conversation. You know what I mean? Like this, the fact that I'm asking for this means that I don't feel like I'm getting it. It means that I don't feel like you're listening at all. So let me ask you to listen for a moment, right?
Yeah.
And then it opens up a space, or it doesn't. And either way, you then have it, you can make what's called an informed decision, right? Like, because so many of us, we tend to suffer through things because we feel like we have to, we're obligated for some reason. Maybe if it's a friend or a loved one or a spouse or something, it's like, I have to deal with this is just the way it is, versus being like, we are in a relationship, we get to create the agreements upon which this relationship works. All relationships are basically a set of agreements, right? Like it's marriage, there's lovers, there's spouse,
Mm-hmm.
there's partners, it's all, monogamy, that's a set of agreements. Polyamory, that's a set of agreements. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Christianity, that's all a set of agreements. But when it comes to religion, it's based on, it's a set of agreements based on certain belief systems, but it's still a set of agreements. There's things you're agreeing to do, there's things you're agreeing not to do, right? And then you consensus wise do the same thing. So when it comes to relationships, you get to remember, you who's on the submissive side, who's on the more extroverted side, you get to remember, both of you, however many of you are involved in creating the agreements, and they can be renegotiated at any time. It's okay, just make a new agreement. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, so that's where I come from with that.
Yeah. So there's the idea of having a certain amount of sort of acknowledgement or validating the other person, even if they're kind of getting over the top or
Yeah,
being a little pushy. Like
absolutely.
that's important to you, or that sounds like it's a priority for you, or that's important to you, or
Mm-hmm.
something. And then you can speak maybe your own mind, or ask for your own space or your own place to say what you feel and think.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, as you said, some people are at different times. I mean, some people are
Right.
very fast and quick and verbose.
Mm-hmm.
Other people are more quiet and introverted and reflective. And so there's a different pacing going on there.
Yes. And you could even, for those who tend to be slower, for those who tend to be slower with their responses, more measured with their responses, they could even put that in the framing of their question. Could you give me several moments? It may take me a while to like marshal my thoughts. Please be patient with me. Like just simple stuff, because most people don't speak that. We don't, it never occurs to us that we can ask, right? Because in conversation, that's not generally how conversations work. When you talk, somebody else talks. This just goes back and forth. That's just how it works. So it doesn't occur to us to go, well, conversations can be whatever we want it to be. I can ask for whatever I want. It's not going to mean that I'm going to get it, but I can ask. I can ask the question. I can make the inquiry. And by making the inquiry, I can bring their attention to something. Perhaps the fact that I don't feel like I'm being heard. You know what I mean? The fact that I'm slower than you, so you need to give me a couple seconds. You just hit me with 5 points, 15 points in like 3.5 seconds. Like I kind of need time to process,
Right.
So, and I'm coming from a space of I can go like I can go so fast, but I'm learning, and I have learned over years to listen, to pay attention, and recognize when I'm not listening, because it can be a really powerful moment to just to recognize when I am in the midst of listening versus when I'm not. And I feel like all of us have the opportunity. It's just we have to choose the moments. We have to choose to take them.
It's a moment-to-moment thing, and
Yep.
I know I had to learn how to listen. It's a lifelong experience and journey and skill.
Mm-hmm.
And I used
Mm-hmm.
to be a very poor listener in
Mm-hmm.
my 20s or many years ago, especially. And people would even say, like, I told you that, weren't you listening?
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard that a few times, it started making me think, well, I guess I'm not a good listener. Maybe I need
Right. Like
something.
I'm missing some
How do you
stuff.
become a good listener? How do you
Mm-hmm.
listen well? Um,
Start paying attention.
Pay attention. So you pay attention and reflect back to what people are saying.
Yes.
Focus, be present, and it's a very presencing experience, because once you lose the presence, you can easily lose whatever is being communicated
Everything.
in a moment,
Yes.
in a
100%.
flash. Yeah.
100%.
So it's kind of a Zen meditative thing to just listen to someone else, and also to speak up. I mean, because some people, if you, as we said, if you're on the passive side, if you're a more passive person, and they say, oh, this person, they'll just listen and listen, and I'll just speak and speak and speak.
Mm-hmm. And there's something else too about listening. I'd like to share this with anybody who's listening right now.
If you happen to be listening.
If you happen to be listening, if you come upon this at another time, listening, the ways we listen can be every bit as important as anything we say. When you're listening, you are opening up a space, right? There's ways that you can intentionally listen, and you can listen for certain things. You do it all the time. We do it all the time, and we don't necessarily realize this is what we're doing. Case in point, say you have a person that you have experienced as needy, right? Like a needy person. We think of them as needy. When if they call us on the phone, when we're having a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
because in our heads we have them as needy, we're listening to hear them. We're listening for them as needy.
Mm-hmm.
So inevitably they're gonna say something, and you're gonna be like, "Oh, that's the thing. That's the needy thing, right?" I knew it. They're needy, right? Versus if you have that same person and you've experienced them as needy, but perhaps in that moment you choose to hear them from a different place. And it's a game you could play. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
choose to hear them from a place of their highest good, or maybe you choose to hear them from
Mm-hmm.
a place they haven't necessarily reached yet. Maybe you choose to hear them as powerful or confident or not needy or self-sufficient, right? And you just listen for them in that way and
Mm-hmm.
experiment with how they show up
Mm-hmm.
when the listening is changed. It's a very, very interesting experiment, and
It
sometimes
is.
they'll show up in whatever way you thought they were, but other times it's like they become, on some level, they become cognizant of a different space.
Mm-hmm.
And so they step into it differently, and they show up differently. And it's a powerful, powerful practice.
Right. Yeah. So something bothers you about someone, you can keep seeing and being bothered by that characteristic, that behavior. But then you can look for other things that are positive or more uplifting, and note those and focus on
and you
those.
can potentially like comment on those things. You know what I mean? Like bring that more to the surface. Like, oh, I heard, I noticed you said that was really wonderful, beautiful, powerful, whatever, right? And then that gives them an opening to, I mean, and they'll show up in that space as opposed to wherever they normally, their default, complaining, needy, whatever. You know what I mean? It can be, your listening can be powerful. Your listening can be very powerful.
Yes, it can shift people.
For sure.
And sometimes that's not a person, maybe we want to have as much to do with.
And there's that. You're not going to like everybody. You're not going to want to converse with everybody. You're not going to want to communicate with everybody. That's life. That's the world. It's okay.
And we learn from some people. We often are tossed in connection with people that may be challenging and difficult and conflicting to us to learn something about ourselves. And maybe it's just to not be with that person, or maybe this is showing us something about ourselves that we need to look at.
And like you said, that first piece, when you're like, maybe it's to not necessarily be around a person like that. There are folk who need to get to a point where they're willing to set boundaries with folk, so they'll keep on being given opportunities to set boundaries. So what that shows up as is a whole bunch of people who you need to set boundaries with, but you'll just be like, I'll just, until the day comes when you're like, you know what? No, I'm not doing that anymore. You know what I mean? And then you may experience that way less of those kinds of people show up in your life because you've already learned that part. You got that lesson down.
And that would be another way of the theme today, actually. Listen, then respond is what is the situation telling you? Repeated situations. Why do I keep hearing this again? Why do people keep saying you're not listening, or you're too judgmental? That was a thing for me, like being judgmental, especially as a part of my ancestry, and kind of coming in and just, wait a second, was that kind of a judgment? Am I limiting myself? Am I looking at things through a very narrow scope, lens, protective or defensive scope? And you may just sense by the way people are responding to you. Are they responding to you kind of openly or closed? Are they confirming?
Are they a little guarded? Are they a little cherry when you're around?
Is it spontaneous? Is it natural? Is it flowing? Or is there something kind of a rough, staticky, on edges, pins and needles kind of experience?
I wanted to dip back into something you had just said, because first off, the birds in your background sound awesome. That's like lovely. I wanted to dip into something you just said, because I do feel that there's lines, right? Like it's delicate. Nothing that we're saying is cut and dried for every single situation,
right?
Because I know gender comes into play sometimes. Like at the moment, what popped into my head was when you say listening to what people are like, some of the responses you're getting, oh, you're judgmental, or oh, you're this. Well, a lot of women who choose to assert their opinions, who set boundaries, who choose to not take certain behaviors from some people, they are labeled bitch. They are labeled whatever the term is, the denigrating term, and they'll hear that over and over, right? And that's the kind of thing where it's important I encourage those people to look at who you're hearing it from, right? Because there's people who have your best interest at heart, and then there's people who want something and they're not getting it, and so they're labeling you whatever. You're thwarting their desire. They want to touch you a certain way. They want to own you. They want to be whatever the case may be, and you're setting a boundary like nah, and so they're like, oh, you right. So those kinds of people, when they're giving you that kind of feedback, it's basically a signpost that you're doing exactly what you need to be doing. Yes, that boundary is set. I don't have to worry about you trifling person. But when you get feedback from other folk whose intentions are different, whose energies are different, whose agendas are different, those are the ones you may want to pay attention to be like, wait, is there something here? Do I need to pay attention to this? Right. And so it becomes a little delicate back and forth, because sometimes there is value in negative feedback you get from negative people, right? Like, they may not have your best interest at heart, but there may be a kernel of something that you can use in, couched in all the triflingness that they just spewed on you. Other times it's just spewage. You need to ignore all of it, because it's like, none of that makes sense. None of that was coming from any place that I need to actually take in. So I'm just going to let that wash off, right? So it does become it's a balance. It's a walk. It's a dance to make sure that you are not 100% writing everything off, but simultaneously you're not taking on the wrong stuff. And that can be challenging for people.
So that's listening to your heart, getting kind of a deeper sense of who you are and what you're here and what you're here to learn, who you're connecting with. So when you wanted to talk about this Blacklight, about actually listen, then respond, what were you seeing out there in your life and with the people you're helping through your coaching and in different platforms and jobs and so forth? What were you seeing there that kind of brought that to your attention or highlighted it to you?
Well, this actually leads me into something else I wanted to talk to at the same time. So I'll tell you about that first, and then I'll bridge.
We'll come back.
Right. The first thing, the listen and respond largely was coming from me observing people in relationship and having arguments. And the ways in which they would have arguments would be, one person would be better at it. And so they'd be talking circles around the other person. You know what I mean?
I get it.
So they'd be talking circles around the other person. But that didn't mean they were right. It just means they could talk circles around the other person. And so they weren't listening to what the person had to say. They weren't even considering their opinion. They're just yapping them into a place where the person's confused and discombobulated. And then they feel like they've won the argument, when in actuality, they never even aired the case. It's like, if it's a courtroom, one side just never even got to put forward their case. The other side just crushed, right? So that was what I was viewing. And it was primarily aimed at the folk who are doing the running around in circles thing and being like, slow down. Like, what are you doing? Check in with what you're actually doing and what your intention is. Are you listening at all? Are you open to listening? Are you open to hearing anything that the person you're running in circles around has to say? No. So slow down. You know what I mean? So slow down. But that leads me into the place where the other thing I had wanted to talk about, and we spoke about it briefly, was when you're, the same people who like can talk circles around folk, a lot of times that kind of energy can be the purview of folk who have big energy, who have like larger personalities, who are extroverted, who are assertive, all these things. And there's folk who, this is the segue. There's folk who, when they get around those people, there's kind of like two responses. And this could be positive people, right? Like I could take up a lot of space. And I try my best to listen. I try my best to set spaces up where I'm asking folk like for their input. I'll specifically, if it's in a group, I'll aim questions at the folk who seem to have the least, not even the least to say, but who speak up the least, right? Because I know, yes, because I can talk. I will keep, yes, please, but I recognize that some people, some of the more passive, some of the more, they will think someone is taking up space. They will think someone is, but it never occurs to them that they never tried to talk. And I mean, they never said anything. And some other people like me, we love talking. It's great. It's fun. We like conversation. I mean, like I like hearing what you have to say too. But if you never say anything, So I was thinking about the folk who get around folk who have, energy, and they do one of two things. Either one, they can take the invitation, like take it as an invitation. There's a person with big energy, and they're giving you an invitation to step into whatever your version of your most realized, most self-expressed self is. And it doesn't have to look like theirs. Your energy doesn't have to look like anybody else's. It doesn't have to be this loud thing. There are people who are extremely powerful, but their energies, like their presence is powerful but quiet. You understand? I'm not that person. Right. I tried. I admire those quiet people. I do. I really do. I'm not that one. But there's the people who I think that you can take it as an invitation to step up. Boom. But the other thing that a lot of people do, instead of taking it as an invitation, they take it as a goad to get small, to shrink, to get to just, I'm not, they're already taking it. I'm just going to be over here. Right. And I just wanted to speak to that in terms of, if you find yourself doing that, please understand, I invite you to consider the possibility that you may be framing the situation in a way that doesn't serve you, like at all, you know, because just because a person has large energy, just because a person, you know, whatever, and you don't feel like you are that, and you don't feel like you have that, does not mean that you don't get to, that you do the opposite. It doesn't mean that you need to shrink. Doesn't mean that you need to pull in. It just means that that's not the way you're choosing to express you, right? So you get to find out how you want to express you. What does that look like? What does that feel like? This person is like, so for them, that's what they got. You know what I mean? But what's yours? What's your version of that? And how can you be that without shrinking? How can you be that without becoming small? Because you can be quiet energy without being small. And I invite you to consider quiet without being small. I invite you to consider powerful without being loud, without being aggressive, but powerful, right? Like, I just invite you to consider those things.
So you have people who are more active and people who are more introverted. And the introverted people, are the quieter people, find a different space than the more active people. Maybe the active people need to be more aware of the more quiet people too, in terms of giving them more space and more opportunity.
That's real. And that, like, I attempt to do that, but as a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, a friend who used to be a really, really good friend, but we haven't spoken a really, really long time. So I wouldn't call him a really good friend now. His name is Reed. He's a powerful dude. One time we were talking, we were all in a group, and he was talking, and he was like, listen, all of you, I love telling you about my stuff because I love my stuff. I love the things that I'm involved in. I love my projects. I'm going to tell you about it. I want to know about your stuff. I'm interested in your stuff. I love talking and exchanging about stuff. But if you never say anything about your stuff, I'm not going to know. I'm not going to know you're doing whatever you're doing. So speak up. Tell me what you're doing, because I'm always going to speak up about mine.
Right. For the active people, it's very natural to talk about themselves and keep talking and talking. And they may not be very good at asking questions or inviting a space for the other person.
Well, that, yes, and sometimes they are, and the other person, people just don't take it.
They're too passive.
Yeah, they won't
quiet.
Step up. They won't, you know, we have these weird convoluted notions of tooting your own horn, of not promoting yourself, of there's people who are, I personally know several folk who are getting into the world of social media and stuff right now. They have a practice, they do whatever they do, a brand, a product, whatever, what have you. And they're struggling with the notion of putting the product out there, because they're like, I don't do that. I don't put myself out there. I don't promote myself. And it's like, why? Well, because I don't want to pat myself on. Why? Why would you not want to pat yourself on the back? You put in work. Why would you not want the work recognized? What is that about? Well, we've been trained, it's arrogance, it's ego, it's yes, there's a line. You can go overboard. I talk about myself all the time. I'm amazing. None of you are. That's arrogance. You don't have to be that. But you can say, I did this thing. I'd love to tell you about it. Would you like to hear? And most people will go, and there was some people may be like, yeah, no, I don't want to hear that. Those aren't the people you need to talk to. Great. Awesome. But just there. So there are moments, there are folk who are like really loud and they take up a lot of space and they're not good at asking questions. And other times it's just folk who are good at talking about themselves. And the quieter, more passive folk don't feel comfortable stepping into that space and having the spotlight turned on them to talk about themselves. So they stay quiet and they stay small. And it's like, if I'm over here in this corner, then nobody will see what's going on. And I have a product, sure, you know. So it is.
In a way, it really is the same problem inside out. The person who's the talker, overactive, occupying too much space is kind of in a way can be too focused on himself, and the person who's too quiet, too timid, too worried what other people might think or say, in a way is focused too much on himself or herself.
Him or herself, yeah.
So it's kind of getting out of yourself and seeing what you're here to learn, how to help other people. So if you're the big talker, you're having too much space, you may have to be a little more aware of other people. And if you're too passive, you may also have to be aware of other people, how you can actually help them and not worry about yourself, and worry, can be more concerned about the other people too.
Yes, I will say yes. And so for listeners, for those of you who don't know, Philip and I are completely different people. Yes. And we've known each other for a long time.
Yes, we have.
And we come from different places. We come to some of the same places, but we come frequently from different directions, right? And yes. So one of the things he just said, I will jump on the back of, I will acknowledge, yes, sometimes you need to stop worrying about yourself so much and think about how you can help other people. That is one approach. Yes. And I think that's valid and valuable. And I'm here with the both and do think about yourself. I invite you to think about yourself, but think about yourself in terms of what feels good to you. You put in work for something, for a reason. There's value to you in that something that you put work into, right? Like if it's your product or your whatever it is that's bringing you joy, and even if it's bringing you joy because it brings other people joy, it's bringing you joy. It's a selfish act. It's like, don't get it twisted. Like we are gaining pleasure from bringing pleasure to other people. We are gaining pleasure from helping people. There's a big payoff in us helping other people. So you can think of yourself and just be like, does that feel good? Does it feel good to take ownership of this thing that I've poured work into? Like when Philip introduces himself at the beginning of the show, he doesn't say, I'm Philip, that's it, right? He's like, I'm Philip, founder of this, I'm this, I do this, I do this. And he doesn't say it in a braggadocious way. He's not, but he's letting you know, I got these things, I'm a founder of this, we do these things, and you can come check it out because we believe in it, we stand behind it, we did it together, and we put a whole lot of love into it. So come check it out. Mm-hmm. There's nobody, I don't think there's anybody on earth who would consider Philip arrogant in any way, shape, or form, right? But he's still putting himself out there. He's still doing the things that are letting you know, like, I did this thing, I would love for you to check it out. That's it.
That was a good example for people watching this of listening and acknowledging, in this case, me, and then putting forth your own response to it. So that was actually, what was it? Actually listen, then respond. That was a good example of it, what you just said.
Thank you, sir.
Actually listen, then respond. Kind of take, and we have those bottlenecks where we are sort of self-conscious or worried what people think of us, as opposed to just saying, hey, I, as you said, I put a lot of effort in this. I believe in it. I think it would help people. Let me share it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it happens all the time. It happens in our fashion. It happens in our outfits. You'll see people who put, women in particular, but dudes do this too. When you want to get dressed up, when you want to look good, right? You put work into looking good. Women, you do the makeup and the thing and all the things, dudes will do whatever it is we do. And then, then when we're out there, we would love it if people acknowledge what just happened, but we wait. We're just like, oh, and then when they do, then we deflect. Like, oh, that's a lovely, oh, this whole thing. Oh, I was just, oh, thank you. But, think, deflect, as opposed to being like, thank you so much for noticing. I put in a lot of work, man. Thank you so much. I love it. I'm glad you love it. That's awesome. Right? Like there's ways that we're trained and conditioned, socialized to not take ownership, to want to deflect, to not want to be in ourselves and in our power just for us before we even get to the other people. For me, it's like when we can look in the mirror and like who we see, when we can like who we see, not because of how we look, but because of who we are, right? When we can, and then, you know, how we look is fine. If you like the way you look, great, awesome. You know what I mean? I like the way I look, it's great. So the point is that's a piece of it. But the larger piece is when you look in the mirror, who do you show up as? Do you like the person you are? And if you do, own that, be in that. Like, it's an invitation to other people to own and be in who they are and their versions of themselves. When we get around someone who's self-expressed and confident, but not about it, not like, look at me,
Not in your
you know,
face.
yeah, not like that. Just like, I am who I am. You can't question that part of me. Like, I'm not gonna be over here trying to please you, because no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. When we're around those people, they're giving us permission. They're showing us what their version of that looks like. And the invitation is for us to look into what it might look like for us. So you get to take it as that, like, oh, that person is an invitation to me. Nice.
Right. So if you can be around people who model this, who actually do listen and are comfortable in their own skin and are more natural and are doing what they like and feel good about and believe in, that's a good model, and try to take that into your life, however much you have that at this point in your life.
And you can also look at, there's a lot of people who aren't comfortable in the skin, right? Like, maybe a bunch of the listeners right now, maybe some of you aren't comfortable in your skin.
Or at least at times.
Right, at times. And so what I would invite you to sort of try on is that the beginning of getting comfortable in your skin is to acknowledge your skin.
Right.
What I mean by that is, there's folk who are like, I'm not this, I'm not that. I don't have this, I don't have that. So what do you have? What are you? Right? Like, the first piece is acknowledging what you are, what you have. This is what I got. This is what I got to work with. And then once you acknowledge, this is what I got to work with, then you can start working, right? Maybe there's parts of you that you want to improve physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever. Once you acknowledge this is what it is, then you can be like, here's where I'd like it to be. I'm going to love myself up as I am. And I'm acknowledge that I'd kind of like to go over there. So let's go over there. After acknowledging this is where I'm at over here. Okay. All right. We good? Okay. All right. Good. You know what I
mean? Then you've got skin in the game.
Skin in the game.
Skin in the game. Since we're on that topic today.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you're involved. Yeah. That makes sense.
Hi, doggies.
Yep. A few doggies in the background.
Dogs.
Yep. Oh,
He's
yeah.
got nature. Philip's got nature. He lives with nature.
Nature, Philip. Did you want to share any kind of stories or success stories about either yourself or helping other people kind of learn how to listen or to overcome some of these challenges? Where they get kind of at odds with people in terms of either being too active or too passive?
There's so many stories. Well, I think one that's super cool is when we're willing to acknowledge when we didn't show up. Right.
Right.
I really appreciate, this isn't a specific story, but I really appreciate the moments when, with my partner, with business people, with friends of mine, when they've had the gumption, courage is a good one, to speak up about a place where they felt I wasn't in integrity, or in a place where I hadn't been listening. There's a good one recently. A dear friend of mine, he how can I put this without, he was in a relationship and I had given him advice on it. I had seen and then the status of his relationship shifted and I couldn't hear it because I was only hearing what had been. I was locked in on some of the negative aspects of that relationship that had been in the past. And I finally gave him a moment where I heard him, where he was able to communicate to me the fact that up until that point, that conversation, he hadn't been able to communicate the fact that his relationship has shifted because I was unwilling to hear him. And it stuck into my chest because I consider myself a very, very good listener. I pride myself on it. And I realized for months I had not been hearing him. I had been incapable of hearing him. I had shouted him down whenever he gave me any kind of anything because I was locked into where he had been as opposed to where he had gotten to.
That's a good, powerful story. Yeah, people change, and we have to kind of listen and stay with them and give them an opportunity.
If you're gonna stay, right? Like if you're gonna bounce out because of however they were, be out. But if you're going to stay, we have to give them the room to change, to shift, and we have to listen to it. We have to be able to hear it.
Yeah, it's dynamic if you are going to stay. Repeat that question you said at the beginning about if the person is kind of overwhelming you and they needed space. Do you remember that?
Yes. Can I have so if you are a more passive person, or if you're just the person who's on the receiving end of somebody who's you're what do you say? You know, they're running circles around you, and you feel like you need a moment to breathe into and give your opinion, and you can't get in a word edgewise. A question to ask would be, could you please give me a moment or several moments to tell you what I'm thinking without interrupting me for the next like 2-3 minutes? Could you do that, please? That's it.
Yeah. Or just let me speak my mind, or just I need to say a few things, or give me some space to talk here or something.
Yes, please.
Right. Yeah.
But just frame it as a question. You know, frame it as a question. Because some of you, can I finish? Can I finish? Yeah, I mean, like that's a way,
rather
right?
than
Like
getting
that's the way.
Argument or feeling shut down. Trying to fight the person off or something. I like that question.
Because at that point, you may already be feeling the beginnings of being shut down, right? Like when that question comes up, it's because the person's been hammering, and you're just like, I can't talk. Okay, excuse me. Could you give me could you give me a moment? Could you give me a moment?
I like that.
To say what I'd like to say without you interrupting me at all till I finish. Can you do that? And if they can't, then y'all have to have the conversation. Yeah. You can just stop. You can basically remove yourself from the conversation. Be like, this is no longer a conversation. This is a monologue.
Right. Yeah, then there's no point of
for your monologue. Yeah, I mean, this is not Shakespeare. I'm not in the audience. Like, we're not doing this. You're not the lead actor. Yeah, I mean, like, we're not doing this. No.
Right.
If you want to have a conversation, you come to me and let me know when you're willing to hear, when you're willing to listen and talk, as opposed to just being a talker. There you go. Work it out.
Right. And that will open up some higher space and higher thinking and feeling for actually everyone involved. Yeah.
Hopefully.
If it works. Yeah. Not as you said, it's probably not a useful person to be around at that point, at least.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Exactly. Well, I've been with Micah Blacklight, our good colleague and buddy, my friend here. He's from Ashland, Oregon currently with his family, and he's a multi-platform, multi-dimensional coach, healer, artist, does many different things. And to follow up with you, Blacklight, some people may want to do that. What do they do? Where do they go?
The easiest way to get in touch with me is via the website. I mean, I'm on all over social media, and I'm Micah Blacklight, MicahBlacklight. But because I made it easy, a lot of people change their names. I'm like, why are you doing that? Do you want me to find you? I don't. The Black Lotus. I can't. Anyway. But on the easiest way to get to me via my site is IamCatalyst.com, and every word has a dash between it because the other one was already taken. So I-am-catalyst. It's not an in dash. It's not an underscore. It's just a regular dash. IamCatalyst.com with dashes between all the words. Catalyst is CATALYST. And you could go to IamCatalyst.com/hub to just go to the page that has a whole bunch of the stuff that I'm doing. One of them is called Waking Up with Micah. So it's 7 days of positivity in your inbox, like in your email inbox, right? So you sign up for it, and then you get an audio of me every morning for 7 days. And I'm just wishing you a good day. I'm just giving you inspiration. I'm just like telling you we're rooting for you. Every now and then I'll give you a prompt, but it's just 7 days of positivity in your inbox. It's called Waking Up with Micah. So if you're interested in that, come on down the site, IamCatalyst.com, I-am-catalyst.com/hub, and jump into the Waking Up with Micah.
Yeah, I'm seeing a beautiful logo there. I just put it on the Facebook page. That's great. Yeah. I would recommend waking up with Micah. He'd be a good person to wake up with or go further with in whatever way you are so inclined.
They're gonna come back and get him for that one. They're like, wait, what did you say, Phillip? Nothing. I didn't mean it that way.
Okay.
So much fun.
So Micah Blacklight, a special guest today on Soulful Living. If you enjoyed this show, please let other people know about it. The simple strategy today, actually listen, then respond. A lot of good tips there. And our website is getting through THRU, gettingthru.org/holistic, where we have a lot of trainings and downloads, blogs, videos for you. And we welcome you for your ongoing success. And I thank Micah for being a wonderful guest. And
thank you for having me.
Until next time, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Micah. Bye now.
Take care. Have a good one.